Okay, good morning. By way of introduction, Michael Marsolek has been a producer at MTPR since 1989. He became program director of the network in 2001, specifically on the 11th or the 12th of September, the day following 9/11. He's responsible for programming and content on the statewide network and produces a weekly music show and oversees more than 30 people that work on the air. Beyond that, he's a singer and percussionist and is a founding member of the Drum Brothers World Music Ensemble, formed in 1994. He's been part of the Missoula-based choir Dolce Canto for 15 years and currently serves as board president for the group. He received the first individual artist award from Arts Missoula in 2011. So join me in welcoming Michael Marsolek.
So we'll try to keep you right in frame.
All right, and then help me get my PowerPoint up here.
That's a James issue, not a Jim issue.
Okay, right here. This one. Yeah.
Okay, then share.
Thanks for that. And let me go back up to the top here. Do this. There we are. Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it a lot. It's something that I do a lot of in a normal world, is talk about public radio, whether I'm at conferences or different settings where people want to know about public radio. I'm one of the people, the face of public radio, even though we're obviously hidden most of the time. But it's been a while, obviously, with the pandemic before, a lot of things have changed. So it's great to get a chance to talk about something that I love, is near and dear to my heart. I spent most of last year working about 85% from home, did most of the programming, the actual content selection, the coordination of staff and everything from home. But our operation as a person in the master control room running the statewide network 18 hours a day. So it was certainly a challenge for us to try to make sure we keep the station going. I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain today, which I think will be fun for some of you who are regular listeners. Talk about the financing, talk about the programming, talk about the kind of the behind the scenes, a little bit of the history of the station and public radio. NPR is also celebrating its 50th year this year, so it's a big year of not only celebration, but of really looking back, and we're continuing to look for ways to do that as well. Montana Public Radio began as KUFM radio on the campus in 1965 as a 10-watt station that you could only hear on campus. And one of my favorite stories, I wasn't around then, but one of my favorite stories is that people used to drive to the Fieldhouse parking lot to listen to the opera. And you could only get that from KUFM, which wasn't even on the air 24 hours a day. Phil Hess started the station along with a couple of others on campus. And not long ago, we named one of our most recent stations KPJH, and Polson is actually PJH for Philip J. Hess. Started with students and volunteers. And now today, the station is a statewide network. Our broadcast area goes from Libby to Dillon and from Great Falls to Hamilton and all parts in between. We've got 9 transmitters and 5 translators, cities, including, just forward this, go right there. Yeah. From, Libby, Whitefish, Kalispell, Polson, Missoula, Hamilton, Great Falls, Helena, Butte, Dillon, Swan Lake, White Sulphur Springs, and surrounding areas are all covered by the network. And then, of course, we've been on the web as well, so the stream and web content is everywhere, as you know, worldwide. Media Network now serving more than half of Montana, about 500,000 people live within that footprint of where we cover, a little bit more than that with our transmitters. We have an estimated weekly audience of about 75,000 listeners, a couple of million page visits on the website, and lots of those are listening, 10,000 people on the mailing list, about 7,000 supporters. And one of the things that's really amazing about this is all of those transmitters, every single one of them came out of a request specifically from that community. When Helena went on in the late 70s, when Libby went on not that long ago, it came from requests from people in those communities saying, hey, I want public radio in my town. Really kind of neat. There's kind of a built-in desire to have public broadcasting. As a side note, for some of you, you know, public radio is a separate entity than public television. Although we're what's called a dual licensee here in Missoula on the campus, meaning we're both public radio and television. There's a number of examples of that around the country. The PBS side, public television is broadcast mostly out of Bozeman, and our shop does the documentary and long-form content here out of Missoula. It's a partnership between both universities, which is also quite rare. But on the radio side, the public radio system is made up of stations like us and networks like us, all who get to choose their own setup and their own programming, get the content from various sources, which I'll talk about. But it's really an interesting and wonderful setup because every community has a chance to craft its public broadcasting for its community. So that's why you have different kinds of sounding stations, and that's why we're very different than many of the public stations around the country. Many are all news talk, for example. Some are just jazz or classical stations. Some have multiple networks. Some feature lots of local content, and some feature not so much. We're about half and half. We've always had a very large commitment to local content. Not all of our listening areas surveyed, but Montana Public Radio is the most popular station in this community, usually top 3 or 4 in the Flathead, which are the only 2 areas that are surveyed in our whole listening area. Missoula is surveyed, which is great, and we've been able to look at that. But there's 29 radio stations in Missoula, and the fact that public radio is almost always the #1 station in the market is unheard of. There's a half a dozen, maybe 10 communities in the country where that happens. It's the Burlington, Vermont. It's a few other communities where public broadcasting is really popular. That's a testament to this town and to our longevity here since 1965 being on the air, and to what I think has also been a great commitment to having a connection with the community. So very specific, a large commitment to local news and regional news, a large commitment to children's programming. I'll talk more about that. A little bit about the funding. The first pledge drive was $3,000 because they needed tape. And they were on campus and they said, well, let's just do it. And they opened the microphones, and sure enough, people opened their checkbooks and gave money. Well, today, we raise, our budget is $2.5 million a year, of which about 75% comes directly from listeners and donors. And that's the sponsorships that you hear on the air. We don't run commercials, but we have, you know, today's broadcast of All Things Considered is brought to you by, you know, whichever group, local businesses or regional players as well. But most of it is coming directly from listener contributions, and that's a unique system. We like to say that we were crowdfunding before it was a thing, right? Crowdsourcing before it was a thing. Public broadcasting has always had a huge kind of direct commitment. Since we are not a corporation owned by someone, and we are not beholden to someone, we are public. License is actually held by the University of Montana and the Board of Regents. It's been part of the mission that we have a communal support to help support the station as well. The remaining funds come from the nonpartisan Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And if the audio works okay, I'll play a little thing from NPR coming up on that, which does mention how that came about. But that's some national funding that's still part of that. And then the University of Montana also is a supporter of us in many ways. Our home broadcast center, which is in the Performing Arts Radio Television Center on campus. Lots of the fees and the overhead for that and our building on campus are part of that. There's a few staff salaries that are covered through university specifically, but the vast majority comes directly from listeners and donors. Pretty neat. Our big spring fundraiser, which is one of our biggest weeks, is an on-air celebration where we basically just celebrate public radio. Listeners donate thousands of items that fellow listeners pledge for. It's like this great on-air flea market and fun celebration of all things. So you can get anything from a trip on Flathead Lake to goat manure to your favorite pie baked by your favorite person. That week alone brings in about $700,000 when we go on the air and we open the mics and we say, will you please contribute? And don't worry, I'm not asking for checks today. The broadcast service is, I'm going to talk about this a couple different ways. We're what I like to call is old school eclectic public radio, right? So again, there's many stations that are all talk or something else. We have children's programming in prime time 6 days a week. The Pea Green Boat is on at 4 o'clock every day. I'm sure some of you are fans. We say for kids of all ages. That program in its time slot is also the most popular program on radio out of 29 stations in Missoula, by the way. And it doesn't even count kids. And is the longest running children's radio show in America. That program has been a commitment of ours. I'm going to share a little bit of the mission statement, and it's been a commitment from the beginning when the station was founded to have something for listeners of all ages. Public broadcasting started as really an educational thing specifically, and it's become so much more than that. Obviously, the news and other things have become so much more. But the variety of things that we are able to bring, the variety of programming is pretty unique to us. So in my tenure and even before I came on as program director in 2001, we always had a very eclectic service. We had many kinds of music, jazz and classical music and blues and folk music and lots of other things. And I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of those. But I want to talk about NPR really quick. NPR is celebrating its 50th year this year. And if the audio works, I'll play about 3 minutes of this start of this program they put together, celebrating the early years of NPR. And I think some of you will find this very interesting. NPR started in 1971, and the first program was All Things Considered. I'm pretty sure that MTPR, Montana Public Radio, had All Things Considered on by 1973. So we were one of the first stations in the West. And back then they were sending tape or sending something through a telephone to try to get it. I'm sure the quality was not great, but pretty amazing. And NPR, which is originally was National Public Radio, now it's specifically, this whole branding thing is just NPR, has grown into obviously a huge network. Over 700 stations are NPR affiliates specifically, that's us. My dues alone for being an NPR affiliate at about $80,000 a year. We pay over $100,000 a year for the morning edition program, for example. And then if you're in a big market like WBUR or WNYC or some of these big stations in Boston or New York, they pay higher fees. Let me see if it'll play a little bit of this. And I don't know if we have to switch the, what happened.
I'm going to turn you down audio-wise a little bit so you can turn up yours.
Okay. It'll play just a little bit of this. I think you get a kick out of hearing it. What I like to say at this point is, yes, we work in radio and audio, and no, it doesn't work all the time. although mostly it does. But we also have really great engineers that are the ones that, you know, ride the snowmobile to the top of the mountain. I'm not sure if this is going to play. Let's see. Well, we're a little long on time. I think I'm just going to keep going if that's okay. For now, there's a one at the end that's a little shorter that you might like to. I'm just going to continue on. One thing I want to say about NPR is they're celebrating this year. They've had a number of specials and documentaries, including celebrating the music that was on the air in 1971. We're doing our 1971 week in September, which we're very excited to do. Producers bringing all sorts of great music that came out that year. The one that I always mention when I talk about that, Joni Mitchell's Blue came out that year. Many, many incredible recordings. One thing about NPR is it's one of the few national organizations left that has a person who's a public editor, also called ombudsman, right? Most of the large broadcast networks, your CNN, your NBC, have gone away with that idea. NPR still has it, and Kelly McBride's specific job is just to be the representative, the liaison, if you will, for the listeners, completely independent of NPR news, completely independent of NPR content, and is there to basically keep tabs on how the network is doing in its efforts to be fair and balanced to bring you great news. So this is our mission statement here. I'm going to show you a couple things on this. MTPR enriches the mind and spirit and inspires a lifetime of learning, connects communities through access to exceptional programming. You know, as part of the vision for that, the ones that I just love are these things like crafting authentic moments of beauty, originality, and fun. The fact that we have fun in the mission statement is something that I just love about the radio station. Expanding the community of informed, engaged citizens. That has obviously been something that has been a commitment on the news side forever, right? Our commitment to political coverage, to the news of the day is something that's very important. And on the vision side, you know, we insist on meeting the highest standards of journalism, trustworthy, balanced, inclusive content. Public broadcasting in those national surveys where you wonder where a particular news organization falls, right? Are they left-leaning? Are they right-leaning? You know, what is their mission? Public broadcasting falls right in the middle in every one of those surveys. PBS is always right at the top. Public radio and NPR is always right at the top. And it's something that we take really, really seriously, that our news team, our news director, Corin Cates-Carney, and our news team follow that same best practices and rules of really trying to be an independent journalism organization. And that's something that we do. We're prudent and accountable with resources entrusted to us. People give us an awful lot of money. We want to spend it really wisely. We also promise that our fundraising activities will be positive and principled. Our crazy week in the spring is fun to listen to. And I was talking while we're eating breakfast about, you know, sometimes stations create the shortest pledge drive possible, or you know, if you give a certain amount of money, we'll stop the pledge drive. Here in Missoula, when we had to postpone our pledge drive last April, we got complaint calls from listeners because they said, "Where's the pledge drive? It's so fun. We want to participate. I wanted to donate that pie." And it's really true that by doing something a little differently, by trying to have fun, to celebrate on the air, to be confident in the fact that that we're going to respect your intelligence, we're going to make our case that this is worthy of your contribution, and we're going to do it while we celebrate rather than cajole and twist arms, has been really successful for us. In fact, both our development director and myself have presented at conferences on how unusual and unique our fundraising is. Pretty excited about that. I get network content from lots of places, you know, from NPR. I listed a few shows that are here that come from these various sources. And you'll see not all of it is NPR, right? There's American Public Media, which comes out of Twin Cities, that used to distribute programs like Program Companion when it was on the air. I get a splendid table marketplace today from them now. Public Radio Exchange is basically a network of independent producers and programmers and network content all over the country. So I upload shows there that other stations take. Summer Music Special, we just uploaded there that Spokane is airing. The Right Question, which is our literary program, is distributed that way to lots of other stations as well. Independent Producers, a New Angle podcast from Justin Angle at the University of Montana. His 2-year successful podcast just went on the air last week. First show was last Thursday night at 7:30. And we'll continue now. Second show is this week. He's got Winona LaDuke as his guest. We're thrilled to be able to partner with independent producers. I get symphony concert stuff from WFMT. You can see that there. BBC World Service, both during the day and overnight, and for specials as well. We also have podcasts. I'm going back to the schedule a bit. Podcasts, the on-demand delivery of regular radio shows. So like Musician Spotlight, The Right Question I mentioned, which is our 13-year running literary program, which is on 7 o'clock on every Thursday night. Authors from the West. Those are podcasts, meaning you can get the content on delivery on demand through your podcast sources. There's also specialty programs that have also made it to air. The two big ones are Fireline, which we just ran, which was a 7-part series on wildfires in Montana. And it's a bit of a history, it's a bit of the story of suppression and how that shifted and what's happening now, and how a defensible space and how we're thinking differently about firefighting in today's date. That podcast ran early in the spring, and then I broadcast them all ending in June. They're available now. I recommend that series very highly. You can get it through the website, mtpr.org. Richest Hill was our big project through Butte. Nora Sachs, who actually won the Daniel Shore Prize, the national award for her work on that project, was a 10-part series examining not only the mining history, but the Superfund site, the story behind the story, the characters, the people, the process of what it took to get from this amazing copper mine that was producing 1/3 of the copper in the world to the Superfund site that has to be cleaned up, and what are they going to do? And now, through the process of that 2.5-year project to get Richest Hill podcast on the air, and the subsequent broadcast, the final signing of the agreements and things have happened. So it was a very interesting thing. That podcast was written up in the Atlantic and the New Yorker, and we had over 500,000 downloads around the country for that project alone. It's very exciting. Our news department has won just about every award you can get, including just recently from the Montana Broadcasters Association, Greater Montana Foundation. Commercial Program of the Year was Shared State, which was a collaboration between us and Yellowstone Public Radio and Montana Free Press, and was basically a political, deep examination of the history of how Montana politics works, of our Constitution and how it relates to today's story in politics, and all the way up through the election that ran through November. That won Non-Commercial Program of the Year. Our reporter Edward O'Brien won for a piece as well, the best this year, and lots of other awards. We have a full-time reporter in the Flathead Valley. We have a full-time reporter, Capitol reporter in Helena, covering both, the legislature and ongoing work from Helena. In our Missoula studios, we have 3 full-time reporters, news director, and 2 reporters. We also have student interns, which work up to 4 of them on the on-air and off-air on the online side every cycle, every season, including in the summer. And those are usually high-level journalism students from the University of Montana. So it's a great opportunity for them, and it's a great opportunity for us to have that many people working, delivering the news every day. Pretty fun. Some other things on the schedule. I mentioned the Pea Green Boat. If you can see here, the green on that program schedule is all music shows. The talk programs are all kind of in that orange color, Pea Green Boat and Children's Corner in that little purple there. But we have programs and shows that are featured on literature, the arts, sciences. This last couple of years, I actually have now 3 different programs every week which have some focus on the environment or climate change. This is such a huge issue. We have a program called Climate One every Sunday now, a program called Living on Earth every Saturday morning following the children's program, and a little feature at night right before the music shows as well. You can see here, we have over 70 hours a week of hand-picked music. And I want to just say how unbelievably rare our model is. Most radio stations, all the commercial ones, with, you know, exceptions here and there for local freedom, and most of the public stations have a music director and a playlist that's dictated, and you know, somebody saying, okay, this song is really popular, it needs to be played 42 times this week, and this song is really coming up and coming, and you need to play it once a day. We have 30 different producers with hundreds of years of experience and deep record collections and music collections that are on the air every week, right? So they're spinning music like Blues on the Move and The Folk Show and Paz and John, which is one of our long-running kind of more popular music show that runs on Friday nights. Hand-picked music and news you can trust has been our motto for the last 4 or 5 years or so. And that's really what we strive to do. Bringing great news content that you can trust where it's coming from, you can trust the source, and hand-picked music. It's really somebody on the air. When I'm doing my freeform show, which I do every Tuesday, for 25 years, I'm on Tuesdays at 11 is my little home on the radio. I'm literally pulling from our collection at the station and from my personal collection, and maybe I have a theme that day. Sometimes I have a show completely planned, and sometimes I bring a pile of music that I think is going to fit the flavor of the day and build a show on the moment, in the moment. It's really fun. And that kind of creative radio doesn't happen that often anymore. One of the other things really quickly that's one of my favorite things as a program director is I have 2-hour-long holes in the schedule every week. I have a Sunday special at 4 o'clock every Sunday, and I have a Monday special on Monday nights at 8. Mondays is mostly a music show, documentary of some kind, and then talk documentaries on the Sunday slot. So that's everything from COVID to politics to environmental issues to anything that's topical or timely or interesting. Sometimes there are debates. That's what I'm putting on the Sundays. And I get to pick that every week. And then the Mondays, we have a You Must Remember This, which is songs from the Great American Songbook, which runs once a month. We have a couple other local producers doing things. And then I'm going online and in the world of music shows and looking for interesting content. So it might be a feature on, you know, for example, Bob Dylan's 80th birthday had a special show or something like that. We're back now doing our live broadcasts, although the Montana Folk Festival isn't happening this year. We broadcast 14 hours live from Butte with that festival. We also do regular partnerships, have on the air the Missoula Symphony. We have the string orchestra of the Rockies in our studio. We're working on having the string quartet that's playing at Festival Amadeus in August back in the studios. Super excited about that. One of my commitments is now that things are opening up, we've, for the first time, really have had guests in the studio just in the last 3 weeks. And really excited to do more of that again. It's something that we can do with our regional footprint. We can really do it differently too, right? It isn't going to be something that's necessarily just happening in Missoula. It might be something from the Flathead or Butte or wherever. We had I mentioned 1971 week, and we're going to celebrate that. We did a 68 and 69 week last year. During the pandemic, I was swimming in the Grizzly Pool, and I was, God, we got to do our 1970 week, but it just didn't seem like it fit, right? I mean, things were just too weird. So I had this idea and sat down with a producer, and what we did instead was between December 7th and December 14th, we had 40 programs and 56 hours content special in a week that we called Honor, Hope, Healing Week. And it was everything from the music that gives you solace and hope in the world. We even had 2 listener specials and listener call-ins. We had every music host doing something. and documentaries as well to support that. And that's the kind of thing that I love that we can do. We collaborate and bring everybody together. I am super excited about a couple of things coming up, and then I'll have some time for some questions for sure. Next week, a week from today, this is the first announcements of this are actually going on the air today. We are doing a live broadcast of the children's program, The Pea Green Boat, from the brand new Missoula Public Library. That's their grand opening day, and our 4 o'clock radio show will be live from the 4th floor. And he's putting a special show together. We've got the musician Josh Farmer is going to be live on the show as well. Some kid poets, I think, are part of that, with a little bit of a library and book theme for that show. We're doing sign-ups through the library to get one of the golden tickets to be able to bring your kids and grandkids and families to be able to actually be in the room. But of course, it'll be broadcast on the air as well. That's a week from today. We're doing an on-air bake sale on July 21st. And I mention this not specifically because I want you to pledge on that day or bake something, but because it's such an interesting thing. What happened was, in spring of 2020, one of our most popular things that our listener thank you gifts are these things that people bake. You know, your pie, your bread, you know, all these things that from all over the state, people are exchanging these wonderful food items. Well, we couldn't do any of that. It was all prohibited by the health department. So we're having a one-day bake sale coming up on July 21st. Pretty fun. I mentioned collaborating with the Glacier Symphony with Festival Amadeus coming up. I'm the MC for the Symphony Under the Stars, which is back in business in Helena on the 19th of July. 18,000 people on the Carroll College grounds for that wonderful big live event. Super excited about that. I don't know if this audio will play, but it gives me a chance real quick to say something about one of my favorite projects that I've been a part of at MTPR, which is the StoryCorps project. StoryCorps is this oral history recording project where two people get together and they ask each other questions. Sometimes it's interviewing a loved one, sometimes it's a collaborative thing, and you go into one of their mobile booths, which is an Airstream trailer that's modified into a recording studio, and those tour the country. The original booth was at Grand Central Station in New York. That's where I interviewed my mom, and that recording that I have that's archived at the Library of Congress and is a family heirloom now. We just listened to it again. She died in 2011. And so to have that recording that I did with her in Grand Central Station is just amazing. We were one of the first stations to partner with StoryCorps. We had them here in 2005 on the first mobile tour. In 2007, we had them for 3 weeks in Butte. And last year was the big return to Montana. And the mobile booth was planned to be at the brand spanking new Missoula Public Library in a wonderful collaboration with them. And then, of course, COVID hit. We were the first public station to partner with them with StoryCorps Virtual, which happened. We turned it into StoryCorps Montana last year, and more than 100 recordings happened virtually with people from all over Montana, lots of Missoulians. And all of those recordings, if the people who did them signed the release, are archived at the Library of Congress. StoryCorps has now become the largest oral history project of its kind anywhere. And the big news, which I have not announced anywhere yet, I don't think, is that I just signed the deal to bring StoryCorps back to Montana next year. So June of 2022, we're going to have the mobile booth in Missoula like we planned. And that'll be on the ground for a month at the Missoula Public Library. And signups will be available, and you can do a recording with a loved one there. I'm just going to see if we'll play this little short clip. You want to get an idea on how I can, let's see. Doesn't want to
get out of the Zoom. Stop the share.
Okay. Stand by.
Now go make that small.
Let's see here.
There, it's a full screen. Now make this small, minimize. No. Now try.
There we go. Let's see if it'll play. Well, I got audio going. Oh yeah, that's it. Here we go.
Which you find more frightening to do, well,
Let's see. Well, we're getting a little bit of an echo. Let's see if I can get it to play. So these folks here, this is
Okay, yeah, just real quickly here. I'd love for you to hear this little excerpt. It's just really great. This is Elizabeth Jonkel interviewing her brother, Jamie Jonkel, who you may know, about his life and work with Montana Wildlife. He's one of the premier grizzly bear experts in the world and based right out here in Missoula. And here's a little short 2-minute clip. All right.
Very anxious and frightened.
Go back. Here we are.
part of what you do is managing animals, but it's also managing the relationships between animals and the growing population of humans who are encroaching on their territory. Which do you find more frightening to deal with, wild animals or humans?
Well, humans are, you know, you get an angry call, a rancher or a person, you know, who's had, very anxious and frightened. So for me, when I'm walking into the situation, it's not that they're lion. I'm more worried about the individual who's made the call and I'm coming onto his. What I do is mostly working with people, having to engage people, kind of prop them up a little bit and encourage them, you know, that grizzlies aren't quite as bad as they are in the books, you know, the newspapers.
Maybe you, because you've touched them and you've smelled them and you've handled them, maybe you could say, what is it like to work with a grizzly? Like, do they smell like? What does it feel like to touch a grizzly? And what is it like to be in their presence?
Well, you know, grizzlies are just, you know, physiologically very, very advanced. I mean, the fact that they can hibernate for half the year and live off fat reserves.
What do they smell like? They don't smell very good.
Well, no, that's a myth. You'll hear this over and over again, that the reason I knew a bear was nearby was I smelled this terrible stench, and then suddenly the bear moved into the moonlight. That's a bunch of bullpucky. Bears have a beautiful earthy smell, you know, very much like when you go down into a root cellar, or when you know, have your head down on the ground smelling the earth. When you touch a bear, or even a mountain lion or any of the predators, the denseness of the muscle mass is just amazing.
Would you mind doing your bear noise now? I know it's accurate, and I think people would like to hear what a bear sounds like.
You bet. So here it is. It's that's the alert sound that a bear does when he sees something in the dark and isn't quite sure what it is.
That was amazing. You work so hard to make sure that animals are still a priority in the American West, and your work that you do with human-animal interactions is something I don't think many people even realize is needed in this world.
Zero. It's back on. And we'll just tap the one tap and make it ring.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will close by saying my favorite part of two things, 91.5 FM or 89.1. That's us in Missoula. And my favorite thing about working in radio is that every day we get to celebrate the connection of humanity through the power of the human voice. And there's nothing like it. One of my colleagues and mentors and former colleagues, William Marcus, who worked at the station for many years, you know, the host of Backroads in Montana, he always used to say on the air during the pledge drive that the pictures are better on the radio. And there's a truth to that when you think about what your own mind can think about when you're hearing that, when you're hearing, you know, that interview with somebody, or you're hearing this expert talk about or make sounds of bears. I don't know where you went there, but I was seeing it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I know we have just a few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, usually when I get up in the middle of the night, I turn on the BBC. I don't stay up for the whole 3 hours. Can I go to your website and listen to the rest of the BBC?
You can get to the link of the BBC through our website. And the BBC World Service does have a really great on-demand content. It's a little tricky sometimes to find that particular hour if you fell asleep during this really interesting thing. Although I get that call a lot saying, man, I love that BBC at night. I listen and it also puts me back to sleep. But yeah, that's one of the things we're working on, is how to make more of the content on demand or easily findable. I get calls a lot from people saying, gosh, I heard this thing and I'm not sure if it was you or the network, and it was a Monday in June. And I'm like, I'll help you figure it out. So, yeah, another question.
Another one time, thanks for being here, and then just a couple of comments. Thanks for mentioning Phil Davis. You are his addition, which you have become. And then I was at a conference in Boston in the early 90s, and I mentioned Kim Williams. Oh my God, this is Kim. So amazing hit. And then is Joel take rehearsal?
Yes. Okay. Good questions. Yeah, I get that same thing when I go to conferences. I say, you know, my badge says Michael Marsolek, Missoula, Montana, and they're like, Missoula, Montana, Kim Williams. And she was this amazing naturalist who was on the network nationally in the 70s with Susan Stamberg, which was a wonderful gift. We did find some tape, and back a couple of years ago played some stuff that hadn't been on the air in many years, and that's really great. We actually have been rehearsing through the pandemic with a smaller ensemble with a technology called Jack Trip, which allowed us to be in real-time audio only, as if we were in the same room. The trick was, Yang Mao, our director, lives off season in Oklahoma. So we had this wild combination of Zoom to see him and talk and do stuff, and then we'd go on the Jack Trip and sing together. Been working on some repertoire throughout the spring and summer, some kind of lighter things, easier stuff, and the plan is to do an outdoor concert in August. When he comes, we'll probably do a Bonner Park thing or something that's actually being put together right now, and then a regular full season, including a tour of Montana in the spring. So December or probably November concert as well. And yeah, I sing with the group as well. The question was, why is the eastern part different? Well, that's basically how the divvying up happened when the stations were created. We went on the air first. KEMC went on in Billings about 6 years after us, I think, or 7. And then both networks grew up to then just basically cover what ended up being covering all of Montana. So if you live in Helena, you can get KGLT, which is a non-commercial station out of Bozeman. You can get KEMC, Yellowstone Public Radio. You can get Montana Public Radio in that one town. But for the most part, it's just divided up based on who has a transmitter or translator. Somebody asked me to clarify what that was too, so I want to say that really quick. A transmitter is a full power radio station that has to be identified every hour, gets the signal somehow and broadcasts it. And we have 9 of those. And then the translators, which we mention only 3 times a day, are basically just a low power repeater, which takes a signal from one of those transmitters, sometimes off air, sometimes fed a different way, and broadcast to a smaller footprint specifically. So that's your White Sulphur Springs and your Swan Lake, and Whitefish specific has a translator. 91.5, which is the Missoula translator, is on the top of our building, translator, and that covers, primarily was put on the air to keep the rattlesnake sounding great and North Missoula, right? Because the main transmitter is at the Snowball ski area, so there's a little shadow area in the rattlesnake that doesn't get the main transmitter. So, yeah, other questions?
Online, one of our Zoomers, Sandy asks, how do we find out the amount the Spring Drive collects?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, we typically announce where we were at the end of the on-air portion of the drive on the air. And we don't typically publish the running total, as that's what's kind of a campaign. But I'm happy to report that the spring campaign is actually really close now after we came up with a little short of our goal on air, and then lots of contributions came in afterwards. One of the things I'm interested in, Sandy asked that question, one of the things I'm interested in doing, Sandy, is figuring out a way where we could in real time, you know, have a thermometer, have some sort of a counting mechanism so that you could literally check in. Back when we were doing so many, you know, phone calls in the room and the crazy celebrations and stuff, people would pause when the celebration happened to hear the number. I was in the line at the bank and everybody's like, shh, where are they? 285,000. Okay, good. So I know it's important to keep track of that. It's certainly something internally that we pay close attention to. Yes. It's a great question. You know, what did COVID do to change operations and help us streamline things? We found out that we can do a lot more than we thought away from the building if we have to. The news team operated remotely almost 100% of the time last year, between probably May and December. So Corin was producing, our news director was producing the news. They were on a group Zoom of some kind to communicate. We used Slack for internal communications. Stuff was being sent back and forth, and then the board operator and master control was calling up that file that was just sent in and playing it on the air. I learned that we can be more inclusive and have that we can use the virtual technology better to be less Missoula centric, really. These listener call-in things we did, we've done a couple of virtual town meeting kind of things. I want to do more of that kind of thing, get more of the voices from beyond on the air. I'm also interested in continuing to use the technology to allow us to have people who otherwise couldn't be on the air. Whether it's somebody who physically couldn't get to the building, or, you know, for example, Alan Setcher, who produces, you must remember this, he does his show in his home studio in Whitefish and sends us the recording and we put it on the air. And he doesn't come to Missoula very often, right? But we're having this great talent on the air. So yeah, there's a number of things, I think. And even on the fundraising side of things, we know that there's a very specific connection when we've got a room full of phone volunteers and we've got all this crazy celebrations. And we also know that this virtual community that we relied on, that many people relied on last year when we were isolated or quarantined, is still there. And if we can find out a way to continue to connect with people where they are. I mean, that's the ongoing goal of public broadcasting in any way. You know, we used to be just radio. Now we're called terrestrial radio, you know, which is basically your over-the-air broadcast, because there's so many other ways of getting radio now. Other questions? Yeah.
Is there a relationship between Threshold and Montana Public Radio?
Yes, Threshold is a wonderful Peabody Award-winning project that Amy Martin from Missoula put together. And Amy was on our air, came into my office one day and said, Michael, I want to start doing radio. I said, great, put her on there immediately, made her an All Things Considered host, gave her music shows, talked about podcasts, and not long after that, she left us, started this amazing project, which again won a Peabody for season 3. She traveled for season 2, she traveled the entire Arctic globe. It went from community to community across the entire Arctic and reported on the human effects of climate change for that project. Montana Public Radio, day one, when she approached us and said, what do you think about this? We just became an ongoing sponsor. So I air the product. So when Amy gives me anything that's been produced by her, I'll air it. I'll put it in the documentary special slot or whatever. And then we've been giving her a sum of money, I think somewhere $25,000 or $30,000 a year for support for that project from the beginning. We knew that would be a good thing. This is one of the things in our industry that I have to pay close attention to, which is, I suppose it's anywhere right now, which is developing talent, right? Looking for those up and coming folks who are going to be doing the next amazing work. That's what the network is talking about. That's what we're looking at, especially as we start to have our own retirements and people moving on. I want to keep looking for great people. Yeah.
You repeat any of the stories from the story corps?
Yes. What we did with the StoryCorps we've done, both the first 2 years ago, and then last year, was we took these hour-long recordings and with the permission of the guests, edited down these excerpts, of which I aired a lot. There are a number of them that you can hear right now on the website. So if you go to StoryCorps Montana on our website, there's a few there that you can actually just listen to on demand. I re-aired them a couple of times already. But I was thinking about, they're pretty timeless. Most of them are timeless. They're just really good little snippets of audio. They're often very wonderful little connections of Montana. And I find that that's the kind of thing, if I'm looking for 3 minutes to put in somewhere to fill something, that I will continue to broadcast this. I know that as we get closer to next year, where StoryCorps is returning, I'm probably going to dig in the archives and air a bunch of that stuff again. I also aired, there's a 1-hour special that I produced that's on the website of StoryCorps Montana, which has half a dozen excerpts or more. It also has interviews with Dave Isay, the founder of StoryCorps, one of the facilitators. A couple of participants are all interviewed in that hour. That's pretty interesting to hear about that as well. Yeah.
A comment, then a question. MTPR happens to be my favorite choice on the radio dial.
Thank you.
Has been forever and ever. But I give the caveat, you say there are between 20 and 30 stations in Missoula, and you're number one. Deservedly, in my opinion, however, those other stations are uniquely awful. As I do, I spent 20 years in radio. The Missoula market is uniquely awful.
Well,
and now, on to the
I
perception.
won't comment on that specifically.
Okay. One opinion.
Yes.
Offered up from a listener.
Yes.
How is NPR and Montana Public Radio viewed in these rather trying times of the last 4 years?
Yeah. Well, there is a perception, and I would argue a misperception, about where media is leaning and where motivations might be, right? I can say that on the NPR side and the PBS side, that example of trying to be, in the middle, to be independent journalists and to not have a biased presentation is something that we're thinking about all the time, and everybody's thinking about all the time. I often will run into people that think that because I work at a public radio station, that must mean that I lean a certain way or that the station leans a certain way. And so try to just use that as an opportunity to say, that's really not what we do. But I'll tell you, in the world of journalism right now, this is a huge problem because, as you know, there are many media markets, online, on broadcast, and beyond, which are coming from a direct place of position from the right or from the left, and purport to be something other than what they are, and kind of muddy the waters. And I think for people, if you're looking for a place that you can trust, don't believe everything you hear on Facebook, and do your own research to try to find out who's going to deliver you good content. Yeah.
Ballpark, could you, as a middle guy, estimate that nationwide the bias is 50-50, half the bias left, half the bias right, or of all the networks, all the sources, this percentage of one way and this percentage the other?
It's a great question, and I'm kicking myself now because I had a slide that I was going to show today, which was put out by Poynter Institute, which has kind of a chart of where the media outlets land. And I recommend you can go see that online. Media bias in the United States, Poynter Institute, will come right up. It does say, and they've done some studies, based on the content primarily, of which organizations are left-leaning. Your Fox News is over here. Your other media organizations are far left, and the ones that are closer to the middle. I don't really know the answer to that, but what I would guess is that in terms of the population, I'm guessing we're probably equally as polarized as everywhere else, right? If the nation is as split politically, that there is a split in the media as well. But it depends. For example, there are no, in the Missoula market and in Montana, there are no kind of left-leaning radio stations, right? There's right-leaning radio stations that carry certain kinds of programming. There's not left-leaning ones. They tried to put on a Missoula progressive station years ago. Didn't continue. Yeah, Al Franken was on that. Did that answer your question, or?
University professors, no offense to them, I like to speak one. University professors nationwide tend to be much more on one side and very few on the other side. Is there a similar information about the number of people who are in broadcast journalism or in television news and production and so on, that these kinds of things, these kinds of viewpoints get represented more often than these other kinds of viewpoints? Here is item A. Some people are really in favor of it, and some other people are not quite so much in favor of it, or they're pretty much against it.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and to be honest with you, I think that's something that the network, and for that matter, public stations like us, have to continue to look at, because reporters have opinions, right? That everyone, even reporting news, you're still choosing what kind of stories you cover. So one of the things we do and the network does is really do a deep analysis of the content. What is the representation of the kinds of people that you're putting on your air? Are you having equal numbers of different kinds of viewpoints? Are you having different kinds of races and nationalities? Are you having an equal number of women to men? Or where are those biases and things? So that's why deep analysis, we've done it, that I know the network has done it. And I do think it's an ongoing question and probably a problem at some level, because inevitably, especially as things get more and more polarized, I think people are going to be affected, right? Everybody's affected in some way if you're in this business. And yeah. Anything else? We're about out of time.
Exceeded our normal time. Going.
My last thing is I have a whole table full of public radio stuff. It's first come, first serve. Take anything you want. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Marvelous.
Okay, I'll let you do that part and then we'll just kick off my